Welcome to the Brohoyo podcast, the podcast about gacha in general and Hoyo's verse games in specific. I'm your host, Steven, and this is my co host, David.
Hey everyone.
This week, we have a special guest returning, Joe, who has been kind enough to join us to discuss his experience with Honkai Star Rail.
Pleasure to be back. Thank you guys for having me again.
Thank you for joining us. I guess I'll jump right in real quick. So, you were in a previous episode 4 of the first season, and you'd played Genshin, and it didn't seem like that quite clicked for you. So we asked you to play Honkai Star Rail up through the end of Bellbog. About how far did you get, or did you? I'm assuming you managed to hit end of Bellbog, but did you go further than that?
Yes, I actually went all the way up to Penacone. So I've gotten into it. I got to the hotel there. I got the intro of the story of the Dreamscape. Dreamscape? I can't remember exactly what they called it.
Yes.
Dream World?
Dreams.
Dreamscape. Okay, I thought it was. And then also got introduced to the characters in the, I guess, quote-unquote main world, real world. But I didn't go through all of that story. So I still have a little bit of story left to go through.
Okay. So to preface this, like Steve said, we had mentioned just hey, try out similar to what we did with Genshin. Just hey, get through. I think with Genshin we asked hey, get through Mondstadt, so like the first section of the game. And yeah, your opinions on Genshin weren't as compelling necessarily for you to keep playing. And so then we said hey, try this out for Star Rail, and yeah, just play through Belobog. And obviously playing past that, it sounds like maybe there's a different opinion maybe of Star Rail. So I'm interested to get what were your initial thoughts jumping into Star Rail that you first noticed?
So first of all, yeah, I actually did really enjoy my time in it. And one of the things that I liked about it, and I don't know how this would have gone if things had happened in reversed, but I really enjoyed that because it was a similar or same genre and the same developer, I didn't really have to relearn everything. I had to learn the new names for everything, but I didn't have to relearn everything, which was nice.
Okay.
As far as things like style go, I was shocked by it, I would say, because typically I like sci-fi. I have no issue with it. But if you were to say, hey, pick your favorite sort of genre or backdrop for things, I'd probably say a more traditional fantasy, which I felt Genshin fulfilled more. But boy, when you first get on the train and it kicks in the slightly cowboy music, oh, I'm a sucker for a space cowboy theme.
Harken back to days of Cowboy Bebop. So you actually favor the fantasy motif, but the sci-fi and some familiarity with the developer was good. And I can hear you on that because I remember when we all started playing Star Rail. Still to this day, I'll call the Eidolons constellations, and I call relics artifacts. The nomenclature crossover is still not yet hardwired in me between the two. Playing through Star Rail, that initial get going, you're introduced to a bunch of the different characters. Were there any of those initial characters that stood out to you and maybe drew your attention, or you just really liked their aesthetic or personality, or what?
I really liked how they introduced your main character. Your main character is one of those sort of speechless, I'm here to just represent you thing. But Kafka, her character was intriguing. And to jump ahead a little bit, the way they pulled her story back, I was concerned that you weren't going to get back to that story very much, or it just occasionally pop in, and maybe it does. They only have, I'm going to call them 3 main story arcs. The Ice World, the one that you wanted me to get through first.
Mm-hmm.
The Shinshu?
There's Eurilo 6, and then the Zhangzhou Lufao, and then
Zhangzhou Lufao, that's it.
Yeah.
Lafu. I think it's
Lafu, sorry.
Lafu.
And I like that on the Lafu, that Kafka story comes back, and you get a little bit more, and a little bit, but not enough to satisfy you, just enough to be like, oh, I wanted more of that story.
That's fair. And I remember, imagine being introduced, because you get the benefit of this content being out and being able to essentially play a year's worth of content in as much as you can stomach, or as many hours in the day, right? for us day one players that was introduced to Kafka and for immediately the appeal to her and oh I want to learn more about this, then we have to wait months until we get some additional content or she eventually becoming a playable character. So Kafka was intriguing to you. Anybody else stand out to you in terms of character wise?
So it's not a playable character, but I will say there is an obsession with cutesy named small characters that they want to make annoy you. Palm is not nearly as bad as Paimon, but for a while there I was like, you get on my freaking nerves. Now he's endeared himself to me.
Did never endear herself to you?
No,
Okay.
she got more annoying as the game progressed.
So the lack of including of a guide, a Navi character, or a Paimon character, you did not did not have a negative impact on you. It
Okay,
sounds.
first of all, the Paimon of Star Rail is March 7th.
Yeah,
Let's
I
be
was gonna
clear.
say if we're doing a guide character, it's March 7th, and March 7th is actually intriguing on her own. Oh, you have a mystery backstory. She's at least interesting. Paimon, I didn't get to an interesting point with her. Maybe.
Now you've worked through the main story and you did touch on, so I want to interject. Have you done any character story side quests, or did you just push the main mission?
I just pushed the main mission.
Okay.
I have a collection of available quests, and even within that, getting to the Laofu, when I was there, they did this thing that they didn't do on Eurillo 6, which was force a story break where you had to play as Dan Hung. Okay, yeah, Dan
Yeah,
Hung.
Don. Yeah.
And I put that off and put that off and put that off. I was like, no, I'm just gonna run around with my main character in my main group until it eventually forced me to. I was like, fine, I'll do this. But it only forced me to do like a couple of the missions, and then it's okay. You're just gonna keep pushing through. All right, he'll join you now.
Okay. Out of question, did the game require you to do any of the side events? I'm thinking of the Bellbog Museum. I believe Topaz had a like Pokemon battler type side event that she kind of forces. Were any of those required in order to continue on, or were you able to just do the main story?
I don't know if you'd call it a side event, but the simulated universe stuff, I played through that actually quite a bit. I enjoyed. I like roguelites, and while there are things that I would add to it, I know that's not their primary focus, but I appreciate that they added it in there, and it was fun to go through that. So I did that several times.
It's funny you mentioned that because they actually have added on to it. They've added 2 new modes on top of the base mode that you might not, depending on what level you are, you might not have been able to unlock. But yes, there are additional modes to it if you ever do want to, or if you do want to continue to jump back in.
Yeah, that would be.
So when you say that you did the weekly mode there, did you said you did it a couple times. So were you doing it a couple times a week, or are you saying over your span of playtime? And then can we clarify for just time wise, how long did it take you to run through the game to where you are now in terms of real time? Was it a couple weeks you spent? Was it like a month and a half? How long did it take you to get from beginning to where you are?
I played probably from a week after our last episode recorded, not aired, so probably around the time it aired. And then I played up until mid to end of March. So
Okay, so about
that, 2
month and a
months?
half, 2 months ish, yeah.
January 28th was when it aired,
Yeah.
so it would have been 2 months ish.
And then for simulated universe, then so you said you did it a couple times. So yeah, was that like a couple times a week? Was that to max out the points, or was it literally a couple times over the 2 months? Like how often did you find yourself going to it?
It was a couple times a week. So at pretty much every time, oh pardon me, pretty much every time I would hop on, I'd do at least one run through of the simulated universe. Maybe not every time, but.
And as far as then the part, so you're running through simulated universe. So how did your team building go? So because I think when you joined, you created an account, and I believe it was during the Doctor Ratio giveaway. So you did get to do that, I think. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. But what units did you end up using? What units did you pull for? How did those pulls go? Have you hit a 5-star yet type thing? Or is it like Genshin where you didn't really hit a 5-star and so you're like, this is what I got, type thing.
So I did start when they were doing the Dr. Ratio. I know you guys had recommended that I go ahead and do it then so that you could pick him up. And so I've been using him in a lot of my team comp. I use Serval a lot, the electric rocker chick.
Yep.
And then once I started pulling on Black Swan's banner, she had Misha, the bellhop.
Yep.
And I got him, and I've been using him. And then the Trailblazer, your hero character, I guess hero character. I don't know what you call.
Yeah, the Trailblazer's
The
fine.
main
yeah.
character
Main
is typically MC.
Yeah, main character, but with the fire aspect.
Fire main character. Okay. Destruction, right?
Baseball, yeah, not destruction. So those are the 4 that I typically would run. I did pull on Black Swan. I did get her.
Okay.
She was not the first 5-star I got. I did get Bronya out of the introductory.
Yeah.
Pull.
Okay. Nice.
And then I think that is it. Oh, I also got Clara somehow. I can't remember if that was through a quest thing.
You would have had to have gotten her through.
Yeah,
you might have
pull.
did a 50-50.
So your
something.
team comp, you get one of the best supports in the game in Bronya. You get the free Dr. Ratio. You got Claw. Man, you got a pretty solid team foundation there, man. I am jealous.
Bronya was very helpful whenever I do bosses or anything major.
Yeah.
I'd throw her in and replace out. Typically, Serval got replaced on that.
Yeah,
But
she
sometimes
is
depends.
still, despite being a day 1 launch unit, is still one of the best, if not the best supports. So she's getting some competition now, you could argue, but still very solid to have on your account.
Real quick, MC, did you go female or male MC?
Male.
Okay. You continue to be a heretic.
Yes. I had this argument with one of our mutual friends, and I argued the opposite is, if you're going to have to stare at the back of someone every day, might as well be worthwhile. But for me, it's, okay, I guess if it's going to be me, it might as well be me. Plus, when you have, let's face it, a bent for the characters to fawn over you with a heavy focus on female characters, why not play into the fantasy?
Yeah, fair enough. I will admit, Honkai is not nearly as bad as some other games that in that aspect, but yeah.
It was not as significant as Genshin was.
Okay.
I hadn't noticed it. I suppose maybe like early on, Kafka's a little that way when you're first getting introduced, but it's not really as much as I felt you got in Genshin.
Okay.
And so I want to get into that compare and contrast, right? Because we've talked about the basic introduction to some of the different things in Star Rail, but can you maybe expand more on your experience with Star Rail? What drove you to continue playing beyond the Bellabog conclusion? Whereas with Genshin after Mondstadt, you're like, I'm done here. So if you could just maybe elaborate on the differences between the two, or what stuck out in Star Rail that kept you in.
Sure. I did enjoy the overall gameplay loop more. I liked having the team comp as a true team as opposed to jumping back and forth between characters. I think generally liked the play style better. If I needed to go do something or focus on something else for a little bit, I could just walk away from my computer and be like, okay, it's not going to progress. I don't have to worry about that. So it was a little more hands off in that regard. And so that's probably from a gameplay only perspective, something I liked more about it, and probably why I continued to play it more. Then from a stylistic perspective, or maybe I should say storytelling perspective, I did feel more of a hook. Like I said, they seemed to dribble out story in a way that wanted you to, okay, tell me more. Okay, tell me more. I'm interested. They presented a good mystery, I feel. Whereas in Genshin, I don't know, I just didn't, the mystery didn't seem as compelling for me. I did also the dialogue, for the most part, better. It wasn't everything so poetry and fluffed up, I should say. It was a little more straightforward and to the point, which again made reading through the story easier and more enjoyable, which then made the story more compelling, I think. And I don't know if this necessarily made me want to play it more, but it made it more accessible, is they're very generous with their pulls. To your point with me grabbing characters that were useful, it was much easier to get to that point, whereas it wasn't until maybe the very end of my time with Genshin that I finally got another fire character. I'd gone the entire time and had only the one, and it was a pretty useful element to have early on. So that was a challenge, whereas I didn't really face a challenge with characters. In fact, I might have even had too many options, and I wasn't paralysis by analysis. I wasn't quite sure which characters I wanted to level up.
Okay, that's fair. Now, from a storytelling narrative, 'cause Steven, I think we discussed this in an episode about 2 weeks ago. Did you, because you said you played through Penacony, and in Penacony, they did something different with storytelling where they jump into different characters.
He hasn't gotten that far yet.
So we're not that far in Penacony yet.
I don't want to speak for Joe, but I believe you mentioned that you were only at the hotel. So basically anything from Penacony on.
Oh, you just arrived at the hotel. My apologies.
Yeah, I've done the hotel and the first Dreamscape. That's it.
Okay, yeah, so I guess technically, if I'm remembering, yeah, then never mind. I'll ask you about that off stream later. So you felt with Star Rail, you were easily able to more access different characters as opposed to Genshin. Was that?
Yeah, I had a larger array of characters that.
Now, is that because you pulled for characters and hit? Because in Genshin you did pulls, but you didn't hit a 5-star. So when you hit Clara or you hit Bronya first and then ultimately Black Swan, do you know how many pulls like it took you to get there? Were you hitting hard pity or were you getting lucky?
I don't know. So on the Bronya one, that one was maybe 40 pulls in.
Okay.
Something
So
like
early,
that.
very good. Early, good.
The Black Swan one, that was, I think, 73 pulls.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't remember on the Clara. And I got the Dr. Ratio as part of the story.
Just thinking about it based off of where he's at and probably the amount of Jades plus everything else involved, he's got a lot of free pulls for the standard banner. You get a lot of those just given to you. So my guess is that I believe you got Bronya on the beginner banner.
Correct.
So you probably hit close to pity on the standard. Again, I'm just guessing. But 3 characters isn't too bad, especially if you just spent your Star Jades on, or Stellar Jades on the limited banner pulls.
Correct. I was not going to spend Jade on doing a standard pull. I only spent, because you get free tickets for or rail passes for logging in, and you got free passes for checking in, and you get free passes for doing stuff in the simulated universe. They like to hand those out like candy.
I do want to pivot real quickly back to some story questions. Just a question, what do you think about the humor in Honkai Star Rail?
So I actually asked David about this when I was first going through. I don't know what the team was on when they decided to make trash cans your obsession. I thought that was hilarious. When you're on Eurilla 6 and you can look inside every trash can and be like, what did they throw away? And like, the trash cans start talking to you. It was very humorous. Go away. Sorry. I enjoyed it very much. I thought it was very funny. Off the wall, for sure. And self-aware, I think.
Did you get the secret ending at the Herda space station?
I do not believe so.
Okay.
Most people aren't even aware of what that is. I wasn't. You had to tell me about it.
Yeah, most people aren't going to get it, but fun fact, if you do watch our playthrough that plays behind our podcast, I did make sure I grabbed it for that footage. But what it is if you go to what is her name now? The navigator of the train. Himiko. Yeah. If you go to Himiko and she asks, "Do you want to join?" and you've already talked to Herda and got her permission to stay, and you've talked to Asta and gotten her permission to stay, you can say, "No, I'm going to stay behind," and then it cuts to black and gives you end credits, as if you've completed the game, and then drops you to the main menu. At which point, when you load back in, you can just go and pick up from where you left off. But it is a fun little Easter egg that, again, is very missable. But I was curious if you might have gotten it.
I had not, no.
The other story question that I wanted to ask, and it's the reason why we asked you to go to Eurillo, finish up Belbog, is what did you think of that boss battle and that theme at the end of Eurillo?
The boss battles I liked that they were challenging, but not, like, nothing in the game was, oh, this is really hard. But there was some decent challenge to it. You sometimes had to switch around your team comp. You had to think about things a little bit more than you did in just your standard battles. One of the things I actually didn't like about them, though, was there's this great feeling of this Deus Ex Machina, where your story is not necessarily about your talents, because you essentially die in that fight as a forced die. You can't win, and then you get saved again, and then at the next Stellaron fight, essentially, you have a similar thing where you've got Zeus chunking lightning bolts down for you, and you rely on this sort of last minute, outside the scope of a standard fight mechanic. And while that makes the fights feel very epic, and so in that regard, it's, cool, this feels epic, I think it cheapens them a little bit. But it wasn't enough to bother me. It was still fun and still epic, but I wish you could fight them just like normal and be able to win.
So with the Cocolia fight specifically, the one at the end of Eurillo 6.
Yeah.
Because that's essentially what we'd asked you to get to that, and because there was a very specific reason we did. Because I wanted to know, because for me, that boss fight, that to me, there's a moment in that fight that just hits, and it's a culmination of the impact of the first using of the R ability, which is like that ultimate, that extra kill, which in that particular one, it's the giant fist pummeling down and crushing icicles. But the fact that it coincides with the music and the way they loop the music, and I remember playing this for the first time, and Steve was in a Discord channel with another buddy of ours, and they were talking, and I played it. I literally jumped in just to say, "My God, this music!" and then I jumped out, and Steve knew immediately what I was doing and what I was talking about, and you had referenced the campy like space cowboy music at the outset of the game captured you, but did that music affect you in any way during that boss fight?
Definitely adds to the epicness. Like I said, they did a good job of making the fights feel epic, and a lot of that is through the music. You know, that, I guess, bass drop almost effect when you think you charge up the fire blade and slam it down, but it goes through this whole massive animation, and you get that music start pumping. It's great, and again, makes it feel very epic. I just wish that there had been less extra mechanics, maybe, in the boss fights. I don't know. Maybe I don't. Maybe that's also what makes them feel epic. You know, I can't play through them without it, so I wouldn't know.
You say that, but
I know for me, that Cocolia boss fight, I just remember that first time, that music, goosebumps. And now I'd say that's probably the best boss music in the game. The other big end boss fights have also had pretty good music as well. At the end of the Lufo, when you're fighting, I forget her name at the moment.
It's like Daria or something.
Yeah, but that music it's almost like just like a child choral music going on in the background. It's very, I want to say tribal almost, but really enjoyed that. But yeah, Cocolia to me was the standout. And so I was just curious. Oh, Fentalia, I think. But that's how it affected me. And then Steve, you had a reaction too, I think, when you did it. I don't know, you share your first experience with Cocolia's boss fight and that music.
Yeah, I think I ended up getting there before you, because that's how I was able to recognize what happened. And it was definitely a standout. Now, part of that is also the two of us were playing, I think that was the second night after the game had come out, and we had been up since 4 that morning, and then we're jumping back in to try and rush and try and get ahead as far as possible and play through as quick as possible. So there's a little bit of that. I was already bought in energy and excitement. It's that first week of a new MMO expansion type feeling, or the new, name the genre, whatever the new version is, the new hype thing has dropped. You're fully bought in. You're going. Hitting that, it was pretty peak for me. Looking back, I will say that I get where Joe is coming from, especially on second playthrough, because again, I've been doing all the gameplay footage that's playing right now, actually. But playing through it again, once you pointed that out, Joe, I went, oh yeah, that is right, that you fight the Destructor or Dragon or whatever, and you end up tanking a hit for March 7th, and then you go and meet Nanook, and then you randomly get defeated in the Cocolia fight lead up, and then you meet the Preservation, the Amber Lord, and then I believe after that when Jingli or Jingwan shows up later and helps you out with the Lightning Lord. So they do have a tendency to, like, when they introduce the R effects and other effects, to introduce it as, oh hey, you're getting your ass kicked, this other character is going to step in and help, and that's not necessarily great framing for those mechanics.
Yeah, and again, it adds to the epicness because they can make the bosses bigger and badder and seem unbeatable, but then you beat them and you're like, yeah. But again, at the end you're like, oh, but I didn't. I did, but
yeah, I feel like the giant Robo Fist I'm always a fan of, even when you play it as an Echo of War fight. I like the giant Robo Fist. That's a cool little ability that they get for that fight. Later fights when Don Hung
Imbiber Don Hum, yeah.
Yeah, Imbiber Dong Hung helps you. I'm a little bit less of a fan of that one. And then later on, it doesn't sound like you did that as a side section, Joe, but have you fought the giant space bug?
no. Is the giant space bug inside the space station?
Yes.
I got up to the space bug. I have not defeated it yet. I went in, tried it a couple different times, was flipping around my team comp, and then said, ooh, Pinnacone's dropping. Because this was, I think, the night before.
Okay.
I ended up watching that YouTube video of the introduction, which was hilarious, by the way. Yeah. But then I went to jump into Pinnacone stuff.
So yeah, giant space bug. I 100% agree. Giant space bug is still a pain in my butt.
I can't auto that one with either of my teams, unfortunately, but maybe one day. Now, I did want to ask this because this is something that I guess I won't even say what I think because I don't want to necessarily bias your answer. But in terms of playing Star Rail when you are playing it, having been essentially 8 months after release to now, or about a year after release, you referenced, and Steve hinted at, some of these events that did they force you to do it? So it doesn't sound like they forced you to do it, but all those events that are still there that were at one point a limited time event. So do you feel, as far as that content being there as optional side content, is that something that was like overwhelming as a new player? Like, oh, what is all this type stuff? Is it something that you thought maybe, oh, I can take a break from the main story, or when my resins run out and go do this side stuff and get some fluff or maybe some lore, as it were, from some of it? What were your takes on these permanent side events, essentially?
I did feel a little overwhelmed by them, just because I think you accumulate one or two at first after you pretty much finish up, maybe not finish up your Realo 6, but you're accumulating towards the end, then you get one or two of these options afterwards when you come back to it. But then they like keep on adding on, and at the Lafu, you had like 8 or 9 of them get added on, and they're the various character stories. And so I've got a whole quest log just filled with them, and it was one of those where it's like, I think I'll get around to them at some point if I just want to fiddle around, or I'm looking to pick up some Stellar Jade or resources off of
Do you think that's a factor in maybe in why this is maybe sticking or playing a little, like, it's a multifaceted, there are multiple reasons, right, why you're maybe sticking around with this, or why you played this one more or enjoyed it more than Genshin, but is that a factor in it, that the limited time events aren't limited percent. There's limited time rewards with those that you'll miss out on, but like you can still get a vast majority of the Stellar Jade and Ascension materials and growth materials, despite not playing when that event was live. Is that something that is a factor, or is it like like I could take it or leave it, depending on the limited time events, or is it a negative with Genshin that they don't do this?
I would say it's neither. I'm glad that they're there. I like that they're there, but it's definitely not something that's held my attention. Like I said, they're just sitting there in my quest log. I haven't logged in specifically to do some of them or any of them really. The main story was much more of a driving factor for me. But I am glad that I have the option to, if for some reason when I was doing the main story, every once in a while I just push through and say, I'm not really interested in this. And so I look into some of the other stuff, and I did a couple of them. Typically, I'd go and do Simulated Universe at that point, but I like the ability to do it. I don't know if it's something that's keeping me in the game, though. I wouldn't say that. I feel like not having it would upset me more, but I probably wouldn't know about it at that point.
Okay. I do have two questions for you. They're semi-linked. The first one would be, while you were playing through the story and trying to progress the story, in Genshin, I know that there are hard roadblocks where you have to do dailies and so forth. And those do exist in Honkai, but how noticeable were they for you? Did you feel that you were getting story blocked the same way, or were they less of an issue this second time around, I guess?
Much less of an issue. In fact, I probably noticed them a couple times, but it was minimal and very minor. And I'm trying to think if there was a time when I was like, oh, clearly they're just getting you out to do like a daily sort of thing or a weekly, and it didn't feel directly tied to the story. I can't think of a time when they had it where it didn't feel like I was, okay, I understand why I'm doing this. They've tied it enough to the story.
My second question would be, could you walk us through a standard week of you playing Honkai? I know that when we talked about Genshin, you had a lot of issues with the daily grind, the having to log in and spend the time on the game that game asked of you. Do you have that same issue with Honkai? How's your week of Honkai look?
Typically when I was playing, for those that don't know, my work week is Wednesday to Saturday. Gaming during that time is very difficult for me. So my weekend, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Typically I'd play Sunday or Monday, get several hours in, sometimes both. At least I'd say 2 days of my weekend. I'd play a couple hours each of those days. And then I probably wouldn't log back in for the rest of the week. There might have been 1 week where I think when I was like pushing to get some Black Swan or some limited rail passes or whatever the special
Right,
rail pass
there's
is.
a crossover, right? I understand, we get it.
There was one point where I was pushing for that, and so I did some more daily login things to get some extra Stellar Jade or maybe even an extra pass. I can't remember. So there might have been a couple weeks there where I logged in 4 times a week or 5 times a week, but typically it was twice a week. And that felt very comfortable. I didn't feel like I was falling behind or not meeting things. I didn't see the little check mark be like, oh, this, when they did check you off, it was, oh, you've logged in again. We're going to check you off. Not, did you log in today and yesterday and the day before and the day before that. It was just, okay, you've logged in again. We'll check you off and continue on that list.
Okay. And it sounds like you got a lot of use out of the reserve. It's not resin, it's energy or fuel system that they have, where if you don't log in for a day or two, it just
You get the overflow reservoir at a slightly less efficient rate than 1 per 8 minutes, but still, it's something in it. It can hold a lot.
Yeah. And again, I didn't ever feel like, oh, I'm missing out on something because I didn't log in on a day, or I haven't logged in at all this week.
Now, you mentioned the time in which you played was essentially a month and a half, 2 months, which covers a couple banners or a couple patches. And then when we talked about you doing your polls, obviously you're using your standard wishes on the standard banner. But when it came to spending your primo, or excuse me, stellar jades, there I go again with the Genshin vernacular crossover. It sticks with you, man. But when you ultimately did your polls and you spent your stellar jade, you said you were pulling for Black Swan, but there were multiple banners that were active over the course of your playing, and also Black Swan is at a time when they had introduced running two banners at the same time, because they used to just be they were doing one banner at a time, but now they do two. What inspired you, or what was the draw essentially for you to pull for Black Swan specifically? Was it a team thing? Was it the character aesthetic? Or have you looked at any like guides for characters and tried to follow any type of meta thing? So I guess that's the first question is, have you looked at any guides for any of your characters, and has that then inspired you to pull for Black Swan? Or then ultimately what did inspire you to pull for Black Swan?
So the first thing, Black Swan I don't believe she was the first banner that was up. When I first started playing, there was a banner before her, I believe. But I knew that banner was ending soon, and I didn't want to spend stuff on a banner that was going to be done. I wanted to essentially put as many of my eggs in one basket, which apparently is something you shouldn't do, but I feel like in this situation, I was like, okay, next banner, I'll look at who's there. And to answer your question, yes, I did look at what people were saying. I don't know if I looked at like a guide, but I paid attention to YouTube commentary on it, and a lot of people looked like they thought Black Swan was going to be a very interesting character. I actually haven't gotten to play with her. I maybe dabbled in a couple battles with her, but it was merely peer pressure. People were saying that she looked great. I said, okay.
Just what Hoyoverse wants to hear. Their marketing is working. All right.
Exactly. I was like, okay, I'll go for that. And I also liked, even though it wasn't something you pull for, I like using Misha, and I thought that character was interesting when I first looked at it, and having got him in the pull, I was like, yeah, he is useful, and I needed another ice character at the time, and having some crowd control would be nice. So I was like, okay, her banner includes him. Easy peasy. I only got one of him. I think I have a E5 Ting Yun off of that. I can't, or one of the characters I got.
Look, if you got an
Her,
E5
like-
Ting Yun, she's a fantastic character too. Yeah, your support roles sound solid in your account.
One of my characters, I got her pretty much every time I pulled. Okay. In fact, I think I got one of the 4 stars. It's the one that I got the most. I think it was Ting Yun. I got her twice in one 10 pull. I was like,
Nice.
oh, okay.
Nice. So it was to pull on the Black Swan banner. It was because the banner that when you technically started playing was ending. I don't have that much of a resource pool to do the pulls, and then you just not only liked Black Swan and what you were reading online, but you also the 4-star the characters that were on the banner itself. And then as far as like banners after her, have you done any polls on any characters after Black Swan or not so much?
I have not.
And is that due to not having resources, or is that due to just, these don't fit my team, or these don't aesthetically appeal to me, or?
A mixture of not having resources, because I got Black Swan around the time her banner was ending.
Yeah. And you said you lost the 50-50, so effectively while Bronya came early, you effectively did, sounds like 120-ish pulls, I think, from what you had mentioned. Because you said she came about 40-50.
He got Bronya from the
beginner banner.
Okay, sorry, you said you lost the 50-50. I don't know if it was Bronya or Clara, but the point being, you said it was about 40-50, and then you hit Black Swan around 73, and so yeah, about 110, 120-ish, somewhere in that range. So yeah, I can see how that would be a lot of resources from essentially not too deep into the game. Essentially, you're maybe a couple weeks in, a month at most, in terms of resources to pull on.
But also, afterwards, I was like, okay, I don't really know what I'd want next. I mostly wanted Black Swan because I was like, okay, well, this is the first banner I'm going on. Let's load in and make sure you get her. But then after that, I'm like, I don't really know what I want for the team next. And I didn't investigate as much. I heard a lot about Adventurine.
Adventurine.
But it was one of those where I was like, I've just spent a lot of time working towards something new. Let me fiddle with something new first, and then once I'm done with this toy, I'll move on to the next.
Next to the next shiny thing. So do you so in pulling for the characters, are you looking at filling element gaps? Are you looking at because obviously there was Aventurine, there's Acheron, that the banner that just ended, the Aventurine that obviously is just gone live. And then with that, some reruns like we had the Jinglu rerun that's going on now, which I'm debating pulling for to get more Eidolons. But so are you looking at team fit? Are you looking at elements? Are you just looking at aesthetics? What is your approach budgeting as I'm assuming a free to play player moving forward?
I think it's probably going to be team comp needs. Maybe not necessarily elements, although that plays into it, but elements and role within the team.
Speaking of, real quick, like when you mentioned your go-to team, if I remember correctly, it was Doctor Ratio, Misha, um, and who was the fourth?
Laura?
Trailblazer
Trailblazer,
is
and that was the fire version, correct?
yes, correct.
Okay, because I was gonna ask, were you running into survivability issues, or was the fire Trailblazer, the protection Trailblazer, preservation Trailblazer? There we go. That's the name of him. Was he sufficient to your needs?
It depended. Most of the time, that was sufficient. Every once in a while, I'd pull in Bronya and sub out Serval, typically. And then, or if I was going up against a particular, if for some reason it was particular or it was electric weak, maybe I'd sub out the Trailblazer, or more often probably Doctor Ratio actually, just because my Trailblazer was pretty highly leveled up and could do a decent amount of damage. But typically, if it wasn't a boss, or sometimes even some of the mid bosses, I would need to sub out. I don't know what you call them, mini bosses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
elite enemy.
Um, every once in a while, I'd come across one where it's like, oh, I just don't, I can't overcome this with level alone, and so I'd again sub in Bronya or support like that, and then that would take care of it. Typically, I didn't really have any issues with too many ultra challenging fights, and like I said, one of the nice things about having a larger character pool was I was like, okay, I'll try subbing in this person. The one thing I did run into struggles with was getting enough of the characters leveled up. If I tried something a couple times and couldn't get it, I'd be like, oh, I really need a character of. I'm trying to remember. I think there was one where I just needed an extra destruction character or something like that. Maybe it wasn't destruction. I can't. Maybe it was ice. It was some element, and I just needed to double up on it. But I had used up a lot of resources leveling up other characters that were the shiny new toys at the time. And at that point, I didn't need a shiny new toy. I needed a useful tool. And so I found leveling them up sometimes difficult. I was running into not resource struggles, but I'd be like, okay, let me figure out how to get enough resources to level these characters up. Or let me send out on the little mission to collect resources. Let me send them out to focus on this so I can level up their light cone, for example, or another aspect of them.
Mhm.
That is one of the things that did still bother me about Star Rail, that bothered me with Genshin, was that you had to level up so many different aspects of a character that there's a constant level up management. But again, I didn't feel it as hard in Star Rail.
I
But
get.
that is one thing I noticed.
I guess speaking of relics and so forth, how are you liking that system versus the artifact system? I know you didn't get super deep into it with Genshin, but it sounds like you're a little bit deeper into it. And
Honestly, I don't. I only really pay attention to it. I'm like, oh yeah, I should level this up. All right, let me level these. Let me level these. It's uh, it does affect your gameplay, but it's not something that I focus on. It's been one of those where it's okay. Why do I feel like I'm lagging behind? Oh yeah, because I'm still wearing level 1 boots. and they're boots that don't give me a good ability. All right, let me find some boots that give me a good ability. Okay, I'll put these on. All right, let me level them up. Again, it's just another resource that you have to level, which, could be worse. But it, both of them are equivalent to me. Both Genshin and Honkai seemed about the same as far as needs to level up.
Okay, fair enough.
I will say
mhm.
one thing that I liked more about Genshin. I liked that they have it in Honkai Star Rail, but I liked it more in Genshin, was the cooking. Having the replicator tool, I can't remember what they call it.
That's the omnisynthesizer.
Having the Omni synthesizer is far less satisfying than cooking in Genshin.
You missed the mini game.
I loved that minigame. It
Okay.
was great.
Okay, fair enough.
So looking at kind of taking a step back, because I know we compared and contrasted Genshin and Star Rail a little bit, but another reason we wanted you to experience this and get your thoughts on this is coming from a world like we did with couch co-op, and you pay the $60-$70 for a game up front, and then you have the game versus something a well done gotcha game or a high production value like a Genshin or a Honkai Star Rail, because obviously there's cheap gotchas out there too. But in terms of these free models that have the microtransactions in them versus the $60-$70 price tag up front, how do you feel this model maybe compares to what maybe traditional gamers like yourself are used to? And do you see a shift occurring from major studios of those maybe more traditional games?
I will say, even if you just pay the 60 or $70, you're still going to get the microtransactions for your cosmetics and everything else. That's already seeped into those types of games, which I don't know, for me is disappointing. It's one of those where if I buy a game and I'm actually buying it, I want to have bought the game. I can appreciate this because this was a free game. I didn't spend a penny on Genshin or Honkai for that matter, and I enjoyed my time with it, and it was good. And I'm glad that there are people who are willing to spend far too much money on these games because they wouldn't exist if someone wasn't spending money on them. But I I like having the option for it to be a free game, and I think they do a great job with it, and it's entertaining enough. It's not like the entertainment's hidden behind a paywall. As for industry shift, like I said, for cosmetic additions, you get microtransactions, and that exists. I don't know if there's a big push, though, for the whole gacha element. Like, I don't think we're going to see a gacha Fallout game, or a gacha Skyrim, or a gacha Grand Theft Auto. But you do see elements of it in those microtransactions coming through. Now it's a little different because for those transactions you're usually purchasing something specific for character XYZ, typically your character, but not always. Whereas in these it's more you're purchasing the resource to buy pulls, or the character themselves seem more fixed and you're buying chances at the character. I don't know if we'll see that come into mainstream.
And so, having now maybe stuck your toe in the gotcha pool, as it were, in terms of this genre of games, do you think you're going to find yourself trying more types of these out in the future? Are you maybe going to keep an ear out, but maybe just for Hoyoverse stuff? What's your takeaway from trying Genshin and Honkai Star Rail?
I'd definitely be paying attention to what Hoyoverse does. I don't know how many different ones I would try out, because eventually I think they all fit the same. If maybe someone said, oh, this one has such an amazing, great story, it's fun to play, the gameplay mechanics are very entertaining, it might be something that I would be willing to try. If Hoyoverse came out with something, I'd at least take a look at it. Whether or not I play it, But Honkai, I'll continue to play as they're putting out stuff. Again, I probably haven't played it in about a month-ish, maybe not quite, maybe like 3 or 4 weeks. But this is one as they put out more story, I'll be like, yeah, I'll jump in. I've enjoyed it. And again,
You've at least done the anniversary stuff, though. have you logged in and done the anniversary stuff?
When did that come out? I
That would
don't
have
think so.
been.
He is not. Looking
Oh,
at his account, he is not. So you should consider it before that ends.
Good to know.
It's login. Unfortunately, it is one of those where it's like you have to log in consecutive days to get the full reward. But just if you pop in, pop out, like it's literally just log in, log out.
Steve, did you have any other questions? Anything else?
But yeah, I just have one last one. You did discuss an interest in Hoyoverse going forward. Would there?
Funny, you should mention that.
There is Zen Zoneless Zero coming out, but that's not really where I wanted to go with it. More, my question would be: is it a solely Hoyoverse interest, or if something that was of sufficient quality were to come out, would you be interested in maybe checking it out, even if it was from a different organization?
It's definitely a of sufficient quality thing. It's not just a Hoyoverse. That just happens to be because I've played a couple other games. I'm like, okay, yeah, they produce a quality product. Even though I didn't continue playing Genshin, it was still a high quality game. So that's why I mentioned them specifically. I'm not immersed in the culture enough to be up on, oh, okay, yeah, this developer, they're planning a new game or a new gacha game, and they're supposed to be great. I don't know them enough. The only ones that I know them through are through you guys. It's one of those where if I heard about it and it was a quality game, totally be interested. And it doesn't have to be a Hoyoverse development. But from an independent standpoint, from like my own, if I saw, oh, Hoyoverse put out a new game, let me look into it. I do that. I do that research on my own at this point.
And I think that's fair. Yeah, it's got to be something of high quality because, as Steven, I will attest to it, and there are definitely some low quality ones. You got to get through the weeds to find some gems. But man, when these high quality ones come out, they can definitely be worth it. Steve, got anything else?
No, I think I'm good, Dave.
What I wanted to do, Joe, I wanted to give you your closing thoughts, closing statements in terms of maybe something we didn't touch on that you wanted to bring up about your experience with Star Rail, your experience in these two games with us with Genshin and Star Rail, and any maybe I don't know if you had any predispositions or notions going in or stigmas about gacha games that had maybe changed because of playing it, but I just wanted to give you a open floor, hand you the mic, and let you say anything that you had on your mind that we didn't touch on.
I will say I mentioned this a couple times, but it is something that I think it's probably good on the developers for Honkai's perspective, or from their point of view, is because they were very generous with polls, you got more of that gambler's addiction sort of thing going. And I don't want to use that word lightly. I know that some people have issues. They do have issues.
With that, yeah.
But they're able to hook you when if you had say 20 passes or 30 passes like I did one time. It's like, oh, yeah, let me just do 3 temples right in a row. And boy, you get much more of a rush than, all right, I just got the 10th. Let me do a pull. All right, didn't get what you wanted. When you're able to stack them up, you definitely feel that a little bit more, which again, I'm portraying that as a good thing. Depending on your perspective, that could be a bad thing. But I think they did a good job with that on Honkai, and it definitely made me want. I think that definitely made me want to play it a little bit more. Is being able to, again, you don't want to compare it too much to gambling, but let's be honest, it is. You know, if you only have 1 penny and you put it in the slot machine and pull the lever, it doesn't matter if you win or lose. You're probably gonna lose. Okay, so you lost your penny. If you've got 5 pennies and you put it in, what do you do with the 4 other pennies? I'm gonna win this time. So you put it in. They hook you a little bit better, I think, in this one than they did in Genshin, and I felt that more, be it good or bad. I definitely had that more of that feeling in Honkai than I did in Genshin.
In terms of being able to pull more from the get-go and build your roster.
Pull more from the get-go and the compulsion to pull more because you have the opportunity for it. Yeah,
and I remember if we go back to your Genshin commentary, that was something you said you were stuck with a lot of the free characters you get, and you didn't have too much that you were pulling for in the outset. Because I think you were like barely making it through the beginner banner, which is like 20 pulls. It's funny that you mention all this, and for those that are familiar with Genshin versus Star Rail, that is probably an interesting point to you guys as well, because there has been plenty of debate amongst which is a friendlier game, despite being from the same developer, but obviously different teams. So it's interesting you mentioned that. But any other closing thoughts?
Other than that, no. But they've done a great job, like I said, with both games. Even though Genshin wasn't for me, still a well done game. So I've been impressed with the quality of the games. I'll say that. I came in expecting not as high quality a game.
Yeah, so that's something that's why we pick these. That's why we talk about them for the most part and follow them, because there are some clunkers out there, but usually Hoyoverse puts together some good ones and are high quality, great production value with everything from the characters to the music. But we do want to thank our special guest Joe again for joining us and doing this again with us. Maybe there'll be a part 3 down the road. Maybe we get you involved with Zenless Zone Zero. Especially, I know you mentioned you like roguelike games, so we'll learn more about that game for its release, I think, later this year. There's no official date yet. Thank you guys for joining us and listening this week. Let us know down below what your thoughts were about today's episodes. If you did enjoy the episode, be sure to leave us a comment, follow, or subscribe to the channel. You can email us at brohoyopod@gmail.com with questions or suggestions to the show. We'll have a link to the Discord in the description, so be sure to join us over there for news, game nights, and content notifications. Join us next week when we discuss our top 5 and our bot 5 favorite Genshin characters, as well as keeping an eye to next month with the release of Wuthering Waves. Till then, keep gaming.